The jungle was alive. Every leaf, every rustling branch, every insect that buzzed in the thick humidity seemed to pulse with the weight of the mission. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes squatted low, her dark green camouflage blending seamlessly with the forest floor. The air was heavy with moisture, the scent of wet earth and decaying vegetation clinging to her skin. She focused on the soft tread of her boots as they moved across the damp ground. Every sound she made was deliberate, controlled. Her team, a group of elite Navy SEALs, moved in perfect silence. They were ghosts in the underbrush, shadows in the twilight haze that clung to the jungle canopy. Sarah glanced over her shoulder at Sergeant Marcus Doyle, a rock-solid presence with a face as unreadable as the stone beneath their feet. He nodded once, confirming that all was clear. He'd always been the quiet type, but she trusted him more than anyone else in her unit. They'd been through too much together. "Keep it tight," Sarah whispered into the comms. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. Every mission carried weight, but this one felt heavier. Not because of the jungle, not because of the enemy, but because of what was at stake. Earth's reputation. Humanity's place in a galaxy that didn't know they existed, or worse, didn't care. They were about to prove something the Drelk Empire didn't even understand yet. "We're close," she muttered, mostly to herself, though the others heard it. She reached up to adjust the lens of her night vision goggles, her sharp green eyes scanning the dense vegetation. The Drelk Empire had mocked Earth's military tactics, dismissing them as outdated relics from a primitive past. But this was no longer a world of conventional warfare, and Earth's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons, it was in its adaptability. A low hum reached her ears, vibrations through the soil signaling the approach of an alien patrol. The Drelk didn't hide their presence well. They were used to walking into a battlefield with nothing more than superior firepower. Their arrogance was as apparent as the glint of their sleek armor. They didn't expect an attack from a species they considered beneath them. Humans, with their primitive camouflage and outdated methods, couldn't possibly stand up to their technology. Sarah had heard their taunts from intercepted communications. "No match for our firepower. Their tactics are laughable," one of the Drelk commanders had said. Sarah smiled to herself. Let them laugh. The enemy patrol was less than 20 yards away, a small squad of 4 soldiers moving in a tight formation, their plasma rifles held at the ready. Sarah motioned for her team to split, silently moving into position. Their training had prepared them for moments like this, silent, deadly, and precise. "Target the lead soldier. Take them out fast," Sarah ordered, her voice barely above a whisper, but cutting through the comms with razor clarity. Doyle was already in position, his sniper rifle aimed at the first Drelk soldier. The shot rang out in the stillness, a single, muffled thud that barely disturbed the jungle's harmony. The alien fell, its armored form crumpling to the ground without a sound. The others didn't even flinch, no time to. Sarah, Marcus, and the others were already closing in, quick and efficient, slipping between the shadows. The Drelk squad was wiped out in less than 30 seconds. The bodies lay scattered in the underbrush, barely disturbing the foliage. It wasn't brutal, it was professional, cold, efficient, clear, Doyle said, his voice a low rumble in her earpiece. He never wasted words. "On me," Sarah commanded. They moved on, deeper into the jungle. Their objective was ahead, an ancient facility, a communications hub, buried beneath layers of rock and hidden in the thickest part of the jungle. A crucial target. The Drelk Empire had been using it to relay commands to their forces spread across the galaxy. Sabotage it, and they'd throw a wrench in the entire enemy communication network. It wouldn't win the war, but it would be a blow to their pride. And Sarah? She would take that. They'd been trained for this. Stealth. Camouflage. They'd spent years in training. No advanced technology could replace the human edge. The aliens, with all their superior gadgets, couldn't hide like humans could. Their pride blinded them. Earth's forces didn't need to rely on weapons alone. They used the environment, blending into it until they were nothing but a whisper of wind, a shadow in the trees. As they neared the facility, Sarah's mind kept returning to the Drelk's mocking chatter. They had dismissed Earth as primitive, as weak. They saw humans as relics of a bygone era, clinging to outdated military strategies. Yet here they were, about to breach an enemy base deep in enemy territory with nothing but their wits and willpower. It was almost poetic. They paused at the perimeter of the facility. The old stone structure loomed in front of them, covered in vines and moss, a relic from a forgotten age, its technology long ago outdated. But to the Drelk, it was still a treasure trove of communication power. It had been unassailable, until now. Sarah gave a sharp nod. Time to move. The team split into pairs. Sarah and Doyle would take the left flank, using the dense foliage to cover their approach. The rest of the team would take the right. There was no room for mistakes here. The jungle was their ally, but it was also an obstacle. Her pulse quickened. There was no turning back now. The Drelk would never see them coming. Their advanced technology couldn't protect them from what they didn't understand, the human will to adapt, to survive. As Sarah slipped through the underbrush, she couldn't help but think of the Drelk general, Zorath. The Drelk had mocked Earth's camouflage, scoffing at humanity's reliance on primitive stealth tactics. He'd called it a sad joke. He wouldn't be laughing for much longer. They reached the communications hub's entrance, a hidden hatch barely visible under the thick layers of plant life. Sarah signaled for the team to stop. She crouched, fingers brushing over the ancient technology embedded in the hatch. She tapped a few sequences into the panel, listening for the faintest sound of the lock releasing. The tension in the air was palpable, but Sarah remained still, calm. "Almost there," she muttered. The click of the lock disengaging was like music to her ears. The door slid open with barely a sound, revealing the darkened interior of the hub. The soft glow of alien lights flickered ahead, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. The mission was about to begin in earnest. "Let's finish this," Sarah whispered, stepping into the heart of the enemy's communication center. The inside of the communications hub was quiet, unnervingly quiet. Sarah Hayes moved swiftly, her boots barely making a sound on the cold metal floor. The air smelled stale, a faint metallic tang mixing with the pungent aroma of moisture and decay. Alien technology hummed faintly in the background, a constant reminder that they were deep inside enemy territory. She signaled to Doyle, who was already at the far end of the room, scanning the dimly lit control consoles. His eyes flicked over the alien equipment with practiced precision, his mind working faster than his hands as he assessed the potential threat. The rest of the team filtered in, closing the door behind them with a soft click. Sarah exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to let her focus wander. Every instinct told her to stay alert. This was the easy part, the infiltration. The hard part, the sabotage, still lay ahead. And the longer they stayed here, the more likely the Drelk forces would realize something was wrong. The last thing they needed was a patrol getting close enough to detect them. "Any signs of activity?" she whispered into the comms. "Clear so far," Doyle's voice crackled in her ear. His fingers flew over the alien control panel, pressing buttons with deliberate ease. "They've got a secure connection going out to the fleet. We're not going to be able to shut this down quietly. I'm going to need a minute to set up a disruption." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Make it fast." The team moved quickly to their assigned positions, securing the room and ensuring that no one would be able to enter unnoticed. Sarah's eyes flickered to the security monitors on the wall, most of them displaying static or black screens. But one flickered intermittently, showing the perimeter of the hub and the thick jungle surrounding them. No Drelk patrols were visible yet. Doyle was already deep in the heart of the alien system, his fingers working across the console like a pianist on a grand piano. His expertise with technology had made him a perfect fit for the mission. The SEALs were trained to adapt to any situation, and Doyle's ability to manipulate enemy systems, no matter how foreign, was something Earth had come to rely on time and again. "All right, I'm setting up a virus to scramble their systems," he muttered. "That should cause enough chaos to give us an opening." "Good," Sarah replied, her gaze sweeping over the room. Her mind raced as she considered their next move. The Drelk were proud, arrogant. They would never expect a small human force to infiltrate their most secure facility. But arrogance had its price. Humans didn't need advanced technology to win, they only needed the right environment. Her thoughts were interrupted by a low, distant rumble. It was faint at first, barely noticeable. But as it grew louder, the vibrations in the ground intensified. Sarah froze, her heart rate picking up. The jungle outside was alive with sound, but this wasn't natural. This was the unmistakable thrum of a Drelk assault vehicle. "They're coming," she muttered, barely able to keep the tension from her voice. Doyle didn't look up from his work. "We've got a few minutes at best. These systems aren't built to resist a virus, but they'll notice something's off once the disruption hits." "Set the virus to trigger in 2 minutes," Sarah ordered, already moving to the door. "We'll have to fight our way out if we don't finish this quick." The team gathered at the back of the room, weapons in hand, eyes trained on the door and the dark jungle beyond. The sound of the assault vehicle was growing louder, its engines echoing through the thick underbrush. The rumble was accompanied by the shrill whine of alien comms, likely ordering reinforcements to the hub. The Drelk weren't just coming to investigate, they were coming for blood. 2 minutes, Doyle said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. His eyes flicked to the timer on his console, counting down in real time. "We're going to have to leave before the cavalry arrives." Sarah's mind raced. The mission had always been risky, but the Drelk had underestimated humanity's ability to move in the shadows. What they didn't understand was that the jungle was more than just a setting, it was a weapon. Earth's soldiers knew how to blend in, how to make the environment work for them, to turn it into a battleground the enemy couldn't control. Sarah clenched her jaw, eyes narrowing. There was no time to second-guess herself. "Get ready," she said, voice low and sharp. "When Doyle triggers that virus, we make our move." Doyle gave a short nod, fingers still flying across the console. He didn't flinch as the countdown neared 0. He'd done this before, too many times. He knew what it meant to be the one holding the line. 10 seconds, he muttered, his hands steady even as the tension in the room spiked. Sarah reached up and adjusted the comms in her ear, ensuring the team was ready. They all nodded at her, their faces set in determined masks of concentration. They had trained for this moment, for the mission, for the fight, for the escape. They were ready. 5, Doyle's voice echoed through the comms. "Go," Sarah commanded. With a final press of a button, the virus was released. The quiet, controlled hum of the alien systems suddenly cracked with static. Lights flickered, then went out completely. The entire room plunged into darkness. The Drelk would know something was wrong now. The scrambling systems would trigger alarms. But by the time they could mobilize, the seals would be gone. Sarah's heart beat in her ears as she signaled for the team to move. They dashed toward the rear exit, where the dense jungle awaited. The jungle that had always been Earth's greatest ally. The ground shook as the Drelk assault vehicle's engines roared in full force, and the first explosion rocked the facility's walls. Sarah didn't look back. There was no time for hesitation. They had to move, now. The jungle awaited them, thick with shadows and the sound of distant alien voices. The team sprinted into the underbrush, slipping into the camouflage of the trees, blending seamlessly with their surroundings. It felt natural, right? The Drelk's arrogance had blinded them. They had underestimated not just Earth's tactics but its ability to adapt, to become one with the environment. They were about to pay the price for that mistake. The first Drelk soldiers came charging out of the facility, their weapons raised, scanning the jungle with infrared sensors. But Sarah and her team were already gone, lost among the trees. The alien forces searched frantically, but their efforts were futile. The jungle was an impossible enemy to fight. A few minutes later, Doyle's voice crackled through the comms. "They've triggered the base alarms. They know we're here." "Not for long," Sarah replied. "Let's finish this." And in the heart of the jungle, hidden in plain sight, Earth's soldiers vanished into the shadows once more. The air in the jungle was thick with tension, the humid mist swirling around Sarah as she crouched low in the underbrush, her breathing controlled. Her heart beat in a steady rhythm, every muscle taut with anticipation. She could feel the weight of the mission settling in her chest. The sabotage had worked, now came the escape. But the enemy was closing in, and time was no longer on their side. Behind her, the rest of the team moved silently through the dense vegetation, each soldier a shadow among shadows, their movements smooth and practiced. They had already covered miles of ground, moving with a precision only SEALs could muster. But even their training wasn't enough to escape the inevitable. The Drelk were coming. "They've called for reinforcements," Doyle's voice crackled in Sarah's earpiece. "Their comms are buzzing. They're not taking any chances now." "Good," Sarah replied. "Let them come. We'll make them regret it." The jungle was her element. She'd grown up in these kinds of environments, learning to navigate and survive in the most unforgiving of terrains. It was a skill that made her and her team virtually invisible to their enemies, and it was about to become the Drelk's worst nightmare. The distant rumble of alien vehicles echoed through the trees, getting louder with each passing second. The Drelk were mobilizing. A full-scale search was underway. Sarah could hear their voices now, distant and distorted through the thick forest. The first search parties had started to sweep the perimeter of the communications hub, but they weren't moving fast enough. "They're too slow," Sarah murmured under her breath, eyes narrowing. "We need to keep them off balance." "We'll create a distraction," Marcus Doyle said, his voice calm but firm. "Let's lure them into a trap." Sarah's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was a plan she had no problem executing. "Perfect. We know this jungle. They don't." She tapped her wrist, signaling the team to move out. The jungle was dense and nearly impenetrable in places, and the Drelk would never expect the ambush. The squad split into pairs, each team tasked with drawing the enemy further into the woods while remaining as quiet as possible. The goal was simple: lead them into the kill zone. Sarah and Doyle took the lead, moving swiftly and silently, their footsteps muffled by the dense carpet of fallen leaves. The rest of the team spread out, fanning through the jungle to set up the ambush. Sarah could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end as she heard the Drelk troops advancing. The sound of their boots hitting the forest floor was unmistakable. They were getting close. "They'll be here in 2 minutes," Doyle whispered, his voice low and calm. "Ready to execute?" "Always," Sarah replied, her eyes scanning the jungle around them. "Let's make this quick." The Drelk patrol was moving in from the north. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. As the enemy soldiers drew closer, Sarah and Doyle fell back, retreating further into the trees, making their presence known only through the slightest of disturbances. The Drelk would hear them, but by the time they turned to pursue, they would be too far behind to catch up. The trap was set. Sarah adjusted her rifle, holding her breath. She could hear the alien chatter, the clicking of their weapons, the shuffling of their heavy boots on the dirt. They were close, just a few yards away. The anticipation was thick in the air, the kind of tension that could crack like glass at any moment. "Wait for it," Sarah murmured, her voice barely a whisper. She glanced over at Doyle, who was already in position, his sniper rifle trained on the lead alien soldier. He gave her a single nod. The moment had arrived. Without warning, Sarah broke cover, firing a single shot into the air. It wasn't aimed at anyone, but the sound was enough to send the Drelk soldiers into a frenzy. They turned toward the noise, their weapons raised. That's when Sarah and Doyle launched their attack. The ambush was swift, brutal, and efficient. The Drelk never had a chance to react. Sarah moved like a ghost, her shots precise and deadly, taking out the soldiers one by one. Doyle's sniper rifle rang out with a sharp crack, and another Drelk soldier crumpled to the ground. In the chaos, the remaining patrol had no idea which direction to turn. The team was on them in seconds. "Keep it tight," Sarah shouted through the comms, coordinating the assault. "Don't give them a chance to regroup." She saw one of the Drelk soldiers try to raise his rifle, but before he could squeeze the trigger, he was taken down by a single, clean shot from one of her teammates. The jungle erupted into chaos, but Sarah remained focused. Every movement, every shot was a calculated strike, a deadly dance in the shadows. The Drelk were scrambling now, trying to find cover, trying to make sense of the ambush. But the SEALs were ghosts, moving faster than the enemy could track, striking from angles the Drelk never expected. "Fall back," Sarah barked. "We've got them on the run." The Drelk, now realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat. But it was too late. The SEALs had the advantage, and the jungle was their weapon. The remaining Drelk soldiers, now completely disoriented and outgunned, began to flee toward the clearing, where their reinforcements would soon arrive. Sarah didn't let up. She and Doyle continued to cover their team, ensuring no Drelk soldiers managed to regroup. Her pulse was steady, but she could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins as she moved through the thick foliage, closing in on the last group of enemy combatants. There were only 3 left now, and they were desperate. She saw one Drelk soldier sprinting toward the clearing, his heavy boots pounding against the earth. Without hesitation, Sarah raised her rifle and fired. The shot was precise, and the soldier collapsed. "Target down," Sarah reported. "Got the last one," Doyle said, his voice steady. The jungle grew silent once more, save for the faint sounds of the breeze moving through the trees. Sarah let out a slow breath, her fingers still clutching her weapon. The fight was over, at least for now. "We've taken them out," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the chaos they'd just survived. "The jungle's ours." Sarah nodded, a sense of satisfaction settling over her. The Drelk had underestimated the environment, but the humans had used it to their advantage. It was a lesson they would never forget. But the mission wasn't over. There was still the escape to plan, the final objective to achieve. The Drelk would be back, of that, Sarah had no doubt. But by the time they realized their mistake, it would be too late. "We're not done yet," Sarah said, her voice steady as she motioned for the team to move out. "Let's keep the pressure on. The real fight's just beginning." The jungle was no longer quiet. It had come alive, humming with the sounds of distant alien chatter and the pounding of heavy boots through the dense undergrowth. The team had moved far from the wreckage of the ambush, but the Drelk were closing in. Their forces were larger now, more organized. Sarah could hear the metallic roar of their heavy vehicles, the rumble of their assault tanks cutting through the trees with increasing speed. "We're running out of time," Doyle's voice crackled in her earpiece. "They've called in everything they've got." Sarah didn't respond right away. She scanned the thick treeline, her instincts honed by years of training. They were deep in enemy territory, but they couldn't keep running. The Drelk would corner them sooner or later, and then they'd be trapped. "This is it," Sarah finally said, her voice sharp with determination. "We make our stand here. Set up defenses. We'll fight for as long as we can." "Understood," Doyle replied immediately. "We'll need to create choke points. No wide open spaces. We use the terrain." "Agreed," Sarah muttered, turning to face her team. "We've got one shot at this. Let's make it count." The squad moved with practiced precision. In minutes, they were hunkered down in an area of thick trees, the foliage providing some cover but also limiting their movement. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best they had. The team worked quickly, setting up traps, placing motion sensors, and preparing their weapons. The Drelk would be coming in fast, and they couldn't afford to waste a second. Sarah crouched low, her rifle in hand, eyes scanning the distance. The sounds of the Drelk's advance were growing louder. She could almost feel their presence, like a dark cloud creeping closer. Every instinct told her to stay calm, to wait until the right moment. She had to believe in her team, trust that their training would get them through this. 10 minutes until contact, Marcus Doyle said quietly, as he finished setting up a makeshift minefield. They've got infantry, and I think they're bringing in those damned assault mech. We're in for a tough fight. I've fought tougher, Sarah replied, her voice steady. Stay focused. The team tightened their formation, each soldier positioned to cover a different angle of attack. The jungle's natural barriers, dense trees and thick underbrush, would slow the Drelk down, but they wouldn't stop them. The seals would have to rely on their speed, their precision, and their ability to think on their feet. They're close, Sarah murmured. She could hear the low hum of the Drelk assault vehicles now, cutting through the foliage like knives through butter. But there was something else, too, an eerie silence, as if the Drelk were preparing for something more. Her gut told her it was a trap, but she had no choice but to keep going. The team's breath was steady, the tension in the air palpable. Sarah gripped her rifle tighter, her knuckles white. She didn't like waiting. But the key to survival in a fight like this was patience. Let the enemy come to you. Let them make the first move. And then, just as the sounds of the enemy vehicles reached their peak, the jungle erupted into chaos. The first shots rang out, echoing through the trees like thunderclap. The Drelk infantry burst into the clearing, their weapons raised, their armor glinting under the weak sunlight that filtered through the canopy. Sarah fired first, her aim deadly as she dropped the first soldier in a clean shot to the chest. Move! Sarah shouted as the team sprang into action. Doyle's sniper rifle cracked, and another Drelk soldier fell. The rest of the squad opened fire, their rifles barking as they picked off targets with surgical precision. The Drelk infantry scattered, seeking cover behind the thick trunks of the trees, their weapons returning fire. The noise was deafening now, the jungle alive with the sound of battle. But then, just as Sarah had feared, the massive assault mechs appeared from behind the trees. Towering over the jungle floor, their heavy cannons aimed forward, the mechs opened fire. Explosions rocked the ground, sending shock waves through the air. The force of it was enough to knock Sarah off balance, but she quickly regained her footing, rolling to the side as debris and shrapnel flew past her. Take them down, she yelled over the comms. Doyle's voice came back, calm as ever. Working on it. The team split up, using the trees and terrain to their advantage. Sarah and Doyle focused on the mechs, while the rest of the team continued to hold off the Drelk infantry. The assault mechs were tough, heavily armored, and their weapons packed a punch, but they had weaknesses. The joints, the back of the neck, those were the spots they had to target. Sarah's rifle barked as she fired, aiming for the mech's exposed side. Her shot hit, but the armor absorbed most of the impact. She gritted her teeth. This wasn't going to be easy. We need something bigger, she muttered under her breath. Roger that, Doyle replied, his sniper rifle firing once more. This time, his shot hit the mech's shoulder joint. A burst of sparks flew out, but the mech still stood, its weapons firing indiscriminately into the jungle. Keep hitting those joints. Sarah called to the team, her voice strained as she repositioned herself. The Drelk infantry was closing in again, their movements frantic but controlled. Sarah's eyes darted from the mechs to the soldiers, her mind working in overdrive. The traps were taking their toll, but it wouldn't be long before the Drelk realized they could move around them. The team was making progress, but it was slow. Each minute that passed, the Drelk reinforced their position, bringing in more troops, more vehicles. Their numbers were overwhelming, and the team was starting to feel the weight of the battle. Sarah's pulse quickened. They couldn't hold out forever. Doyle, we need a miracle, Sarah said, her voice tight. On it, Doyle replied. With precision that only years of experience could bring, he adjusted his rifle, lining up a shot on the mech's exposed fuel tank. The blast that followed was deafening. The mech staggered, its body crumpling inward as flames erupted from the tank. The jungle seemed to breathe a momentary sigh of relief. But Sarah knew they weren't out of danger yet. More Drelk reinforcements were coming, and they didn't have much time left. "We've got to move now," Sarah shouted, pulling her team together. "Regroup and fall back. We've made our mark here, but this fight isn't ours to win." The jungle was filled with the sounds of retreating soldiers, the Drelk still in hot pursuit, but the team was already disappearing into the depths of the forest, vanishing once again into the shadows they had claimed as their own. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But the message had been sent. The humans were not to be underestimated.